have you here. So yeah, take it on. For everybody that maybe doesn't know, Corey and Andrew are going to walk us through a really, really cool website they did that apparently has all the things. So guys, take it on.
Sweet. Thank y'all. I mean, let's start by just like maybe overview who we are. I can start, and then Andrew. So yeah, my name's Corey. I am a just Webflow nerd and super fan. By day, I'm a brand designer on the web team at Webflow, and in the eves and weekends, and when my children are asleep, I am a digital lead at ShapeMaker, which is a small but mighty Webflow brand and strategy agency where I got to jam on this project. Partytrick. Did somebody? Okay, so thank you, Aaron, who is also on and on the team. Dropped it in the chat, the link to that. And so yeah, that is me, Andrew.
Hey, I'm Andrew Bass. I've been working with ShapeMaker now. I think it's been 7 months now, something like that, maybe 6, somewhere around there. Before that, I've just been consulting for a while, and honestly, largely in like the e-commerce Shopify space. And I also build a Webflow app, FlowFam. It does upsells and cross-sells for Webflow e-commerce. And then way before that, I was a banker, but those days are far, far in my past, so I don't like to think about them. Yeah, that's me.
Rad. Sweet. I mean, I think we'll start by I can click around the site. Obviously, y'all feel free to do from the link as well in the chat. And specifically, unless you would like to create an account, feel free. But yeah, I'll walk through some of the more like logic and product-oriented stuff when you do have a paid account on the site. So let me share my screen.
Wait, but before we start, this design is so gorgeous. Who did this?
Yeah, so the Partytrick, the ShapeMaker team did everything from naming and strategy, brand strategy, product strategy, all of that, all the way through the build and launch of the product. So like ShapeMaker, I would say what is unique about us is just that we prefer to only take on projects that are like end to end. And so we have a few brand specific designers that work on identities and things. We have Alexander and Gillian, our fearless leaders, that run all of the like creative direction and strategy. Gillian specifically is like a just incredible person with mass amounts of experience in strategy and naming and content. And so she drove a lot of that side of things. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Is everybody inspecting the fonts? Because I am.
Can you all see my screen share?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then, I mean, thank you, Melissa, for the question. I would say, please, this is like super casual, not much prep. So please stop me or Andrew at any point if y'all have questions about like specific things or whatever. So yeah, Partytrick site. After we landed on the brand and scope, and I'll show some of that work here in a sec, then the initial launch of the site was pre-product, if you will. So it was just marketing pages that outline things like how it works, and then blog and FAQs about, etc. For example, About outlines the founder, Virginia, who is a renowned event planner based out of Aspen, Colorado, and has had the product vision for this for years, actually, and had previously tried to launch this under a different brand, not quite as much of a team, and with not as much success. And so this is kind of essentially the V2 approach at it, and with a much more in-depth and strategy-focused outcome. Ultimately, yeah. So that kind of outlines that there. We also had contact and some like, sign up to get on the wait list things that launched initially. And then when after that launched, we worked on generating all of the content that drives these parties. So if you haven't already gathered from the site, what Partytrick is a curated directory, really, if you will, of pre-built parties of different styles and types. So if you go to the parties page, you can see what's in there now. There's around, let's look at the Airtable, there's 28, 29 parties so far, with a goal of getting closer to 50, I think, within the next few months. And every single party that you click into is just like chocked full of content at various levels, showing like different items to buy, what the thing should look like, tips and tricks on like invites, gifting, music, etc. And then the product end of this is really, you know, for people to pay a pretty relatively low fee per month or annually to get access to the full amount of content. And then also to be able to like create parties, which I can show in a second, and then get notifications leading up to your actual party event date on how and when to execute everything. And a lot of this like comes back to the ethos of, you know, like this at the in the hero, you know, we're all about DIY ease, not DIY squeeze. I was interested to learn like there's this big kind of like faux pas in the event space around like Pinterest and Pinterest fails, and people try to make these beautiful stylized experiences. And it's not always as easy as it seems to just like find some Pinterest posts and then execute. And the drive and hope of Partytrick is really to make that more feasibly possible, especially from the like experience and perspective of somebody like Virginia that has thrown, you know, hundreds of parties at various different levels, and like some that are very, very high end scale. So yeah, kind of the intro of that. If I go to log in, we can show some of the other functionality. So the login and auth functionality is using Auth. The reason we chose, if I can type my password correctly, would be awesome. The reason we chose Auth versus MemberStack or even native memberships was primarily around just like the full suite of tooling that it offers outside of just authentication. That you can do, you know, again, authentication, hiding and showing elements based on their individual level or element, and the logged in different accounts that people would be accessing the site with, as well as other things like help desk. They have like a whole like support functionality built in. And then another initial driver we didn't fully end up using based on this was this whole email marketing system and drip campaigns that is built in. As you know, this was our original like foundation for that. We ended up going a different direction that Andrew will walk through. But yeah, that was kind of how we got on Auth. So once you're logged in, you have this dashboard page that is all the parties you've created or, you know, past parties. Most of all this first tab that you see is all custom functionality built by the glorious wizard that is Andrew. And a lot of this is, again, I'll, you know, try to not get into too much detail, but storing data, you know, at like a meta level in your Auth account, and then using JavaScript and some backend functionality to pull it in. And then you can see like things that you have to do leading up to the party associated with each one. You can edit the party name, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to jump in really quickly, giving shout outs to Auth. So a big part of this brief was we didn't want to give them too much to like maintain. We didn't want to give them a database or anything like that. So actually everything you see here is stored in Auth. It's kind of acting as a database right now, where I feel comfortable because if there's ever a problem, they can go Auth and they can click and they can delete or edit anything. So it worked out really well. And just like the Auth technology is amazing. Everything caches really well. I was super worried about loading, but wasn't like performance has been great and stuff there. So all the props Auth.
100%. And shout out to Jeff and that team. They're, even from a support perspective and stuff, they've been incredible to work with. And yeah, just it's a really capable platform. So yeah, thank you, Andrew. +1.
Thanks, guys.
Other things on the dashboard here, saved parties. This is just JetBoost favoriting functionality. So we're using JetBoost for filter search, pagination, and then primarily favoriting across the site. So, you know, just even an example of kind of layering those different toolings together. And then the accounts tab is just an embed of account data from Auth that we're just using some custom CSS to style and make it feel like it's all one in the same experience.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love the way that you guys have styled the Auth embeds. I don't think I've ever seen like such extensive styling. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like an embed at all.
Yeah.
Or like part of the site.
And that was the goal, right? Is like we all know this, or even if you're new and listening, you know, no code and that space is like super capable, but like sometimes, let's be honest, it's a little like duct tapey, right? Like you're putting things together, and like the real challenge or magic sometimes is not even just getting it to work, but like having the actual experience in the final product feel seamless and like it's all one thing. And so ever since the beginning and scoping all of this, like that was definitely a priority. And we felt like we could do it well with Webflow and some of these other tools. So
yeah, people on our team honestly sometimes forget, hey, is this an outside embed or is this like native to Webflow because it's so seamless?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, then if we go through this like kind of primary user flow, I signed up for an account. Now I want to go create a party. I might browse different parties. Again, pretty basic JetBoost type functionality for filtering and pagination, tags, etc. And then if I say, I find a party that I like, come through, I can like see some preview images up here. This is using Swiper, is a JS library. And then because of having this specific overlay effect, we're using that library everywhere across the site. We'll get into more of maybe the nerdy deets later. And then, I can go ahead and set up the party directly from here. But otherwise, if I browse the party, I can see, this individual scene or the moment selector. One direction this may still go in the future, that was kind of the original vision, is actually making custom 3D scenes of like tablescapes and things like that for every party. This ultimately ended up being a more realistic thing to execute, which is this collage style. And then there's actually a clonable out on my Webflow profile of this that's all built with the CMS. So if you have a use for something like this, go check that out. And then in every tab is 3 different types of card styles that deliver information about the different categories like decor, tips and tricks, food, beverage, music, fun and games, etc. And this was like probably one of the more challenging parts and a big driver of why we used Airtable, let alone the just sheer number of CMS items. Like we're probably pushing close to 2,500 or 3,000 across all these tables. Is that like there is a lot of references within references to make all this possible. So like if I open a card to get more items, it pulls in more items, and you saw that loader there for a sec. So we're using like a little bit of JavaScript to like fetch those items in here. And they're all
How did you guys get around the reference within reference limits?
Yeah, so that's where, again, Airtable was key and JavaScript was key. As we all know, obviously I work at Webflow, big hearts, I will forever be there if they'll allow me. But nested collections natively is pretty much worthless. Like it's so limited that I would say almost always now I don't even like consider it an option. So if we do nesting, it's always done with JavaScript. I also had initially, just in doing like very early testing, we're like, oh, we can maybe use FinSuite attributes, which is also super great. But I found out with that, even the nested option there, you can't use on collection template pages for one reason or another. And so this is a collection template page, and so it ultimately worked out for the best because of other things we were pulling. But yeah, that's the route there, is that these are all multi-reference fields. I'll show you in the CMS, and then we're using JavaScript to like pull these in to the UI. Yeah, and then there's conditional visibility set on the cards as well to show different types. So you can see some have the arrow here and click out to an external blog post or an Amazon product or something like that. Some of them open the drawers. And then let's see, I don't know if we can find one. Some of them are also just like straight up static, where it's just like this right here, wine list, right? It's just saying, hey, go get a wine list. Here's some examples. We don't need to show you individual bottles or anything like that. And so that's all conditional visibility. These are native tab elements and just, some overflow styling and such. And then lastly down here is the timeline. So every party has an associated timeline that is then associated via reference fields with individual notifications, which are each of these tabs. 14 days before, these are the things that need to get done. And depending on the way that it's set up for each party or each notification, the customer or the user, in my case, I would receive emails and text notifications with this kind of outlined content. And the text content and the email content is all unique. And that's all the functionality that Andrew can show and speak more accurately to. Pulling this in on the front end, we are using FinSuite's attributes for dynamic tabs in a very layered and elegant way, because this is also using JavaScript to fetch this content from the other template page because of nested collection limits. But it works, you know, so yeah. And then down here at the party, we just have other parties and another call to action to set up the party. So if I go ahead and set up the party, we'll say flow party, woo! Then we can set a date. That has to be sometime in the future. And then we're using a flat picker, a JavaScript library to style these. And 6 p.m., 5 p.m., I don't know, doesn't matter. I can go ahead and create the party and then go back to my dashboard. And so, you know, what has just happened there is that party info is captured and then stored, as Andrew mentioned, in my Auth setup profile. And then when I load this page back up, it's here at the list, right? And so then I can open this up and see. And then there's certain other like small details that we're still kind of iterating on, but like one is you can see these bullets are filled and not. And this is based on like the timeline. And, you know, since this is less than 14 days out, these technically are filled or, you know, would have been something that already happened. Yeah, so that's the kind of primary user flow. I'll try to stop ranting, and that's the overview. Andrew, anything else to add? Otherwise, we can kind of like, I can do a really quick of the strategy and brand, and then we can get more into the dev stuff.
Yeah, no, I learned a lot from that go through. No, I think it would be good to move in kind of like how we work through the project, both from the dev side and the design, how it kind of came together.
Cool. And again, stop us at any point. So real quick before the dev stuff, you know, this was already kind of asked a little bit, but, you know, even in Figma, this is just our web file. So we did have a whole separate file of like where all the brand early type of stuff happened. But as you can see, you know, lots of iterations, as every good project is, through like wireframing, inspiration gathering on other sites, and how that UI comes to life in alignment with the brand. And then individual mocks for like the marketing site. Once we get into product work, how we like wireframed everything. Our general web design process is what, you know, I always refer to as like mid fidelity. So even looking at the marketing site, right, we will typically mock up like high fidelity, the homepage and any other key pages, and then everything else is like mid fidelity. So it's no images, all black and white or gray tones of the actual brand palette. And then, but using final typography and layout just so that like it still represents generally visually what's going to be created, but in a little bit more of a tone back method, so that, you know, especially like images and colors always ends up being a tripping point for clients we found. So, did somebody say something? Maybe crickets. Okay, cool. And then I kind of quickly jumped over this, but these were even just some visuals of the final brand direction and brand guides that Nathan Holtis and Alexander primarily led. And then also Elise on our team was an awesome support with a lot of the visuals and even creating some of the like illustration styles that you see here that are all completely unique, as well as like some smaller scale versions of them that are more from like libraries and things. So a lot of this pre-work was huge. And I think like something that we find is really to our advantage when we do end-to-end is things like color palettes and accessibility. Like we can ensure that these palettes that we are designing from scratch are accessible for the variety of use cases we'll be implementing them with, as well as just like thinking through how certain patterns like the ripped edges and things like that will then translate to things on the web and other deliverables. Like we've done a lot of email work, even like other like early signage and social type work. So yeah, that's kind of high level on the brand. Andrew, do you want to take the reins and talk about even some of like early stuff on product planning?
Let me see.
Before we jump into it, we have a question. We have a few questions.
Yeah.
How the hell did you guys plan this all out and not get overwhelmed? Is the first one.
You're about to see how overwhelmed we were for a second.
Okay. Then the second one is curious to see how the Airtable implementation works under the hood.
Yep.
Are you calling the Airtable API directly, or is there any layer between Airtable and Webflow, or is Airtable pushing data to the CMS?
I can quickly high level that. Like Andrew said, the planning for sure he'll show it was, is a lot. I'd say that the high level is like projects like this are taken in bite size, right? You don't just like sit down and plan everything in one day. It was like piece by piece by piece, like vetting one product, one solution at a time, and then consistently meeting and staying in alignment with both the client and the rest of our team on how we're going to implement stuff. Like that's where Andrew and I were like tied to hip for a lot of things on just like vetting back and forth. And then yes, Whale Sync is the way that we're connecting Airtable, and I'll put that in the chat, and Webflow. I can show that after we get through some of the planning stuff. So Whale Sync is the best.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Can everyone see my screen?
Indeed.
Yes.
So I guess before I dive into it, I think it's important to like talk about what the brief was. So they wanted something that was above an MVP, but not quite what I consider like a Series A funded startup, right? They wanted something that was very functional and very high bar for design. So with that, talking to Corey and the ShapeMaker team, I wanted to like push as much stuff into Webflow as possible for a couple of reasons. One, they're amazing with Webflow, and I know that they can move really quickly. But two, also maintainability. When I do a project, I want to give it to a client, and I want them to feel good about running it in the future. So I'm going to walk through. Here is kind of like over the months we finally got to. Here's the end product. But to get there, this is how I usually do this in pencil and paper, but this is in FigJam. I've really enjoyed that. We just kind of started putting things together, and this was like a lot of discussions like, hey, can we use Webflow? We kind of knew that we wanted to use Outseta. Maybe we could throw JetBoost in there. We're getting all these like requests from the clients and stuff. So over time, we're like filtering it out, and I'm working through, okay, how are we going to have the party and these parties? They want to send the text messages and the emails. So we want a database, but I don't feel comfortable giving the clients a database. So we're trying to find that nice middle ground. I could walk through all this, but it's probably more important just to like get to the end. But this is really to show that like it wasn't like it was overwhelming, but it's just a matter of like putting it all on paper and playing with the things and starting to figure it out. So this is kind of our system as we have it right now. Like Corey said, Airtable is our database, for lack of a better word, and we're using Whale Sync to sync it to Webflow. Once it gets into Webflow, when I say it, really the parties. So every party is like a unique JSON data object, and it looks like this, where you can see we have the email content in here, we have when we're sending the notifications, and then there's also text messages in there too. So all that is built in Airtable, flows through Webflow, and then we grab it from the page and we store it in Outseta. Now, once it's in Outseta, that's basically our database. From there, we have, this is a tool called Zeplo. Zeplo it does a couple different things. And this is going to get really technical, so please ask me questions if like I'm just going through things really quickly, because it's a lot. So Zeplo does queuing for serverless Lambdas. Basically, serverless Lambda is like you call up to a server, and it's got like special scaling sort of parameters. And it does a thing and sends it back. What Zeplo does is like you send it up to Zeplo, and then it says, at this time, I'm going to send this information for the Lambda to do the thing. Also, Zeplo does cron jobs. So cron jobs are just like on a set schedule, do a thing, right? So for us, our set schedule is, hey, every morning, look at all the Outseta parties and then parse them and send the appropriate text and emails based on the timing of the party. So this is looking at it every day. Every day we're saying, hey, we want to get all the different accounts. And then once we get all the different accounts, we're actually queuing all the different notifications. So you can think about it as, hey, look at Outseta, and then from Outseta, shoot out the like hundreds of notifications that we need to send. So that's basically this flow. And then we get to kind of the end where we use Twilio and SendGrid to actually send the text messages and emails. the really cool thing I wanted to like emphasize was we're actually grabbing all this data from the Webflow page, which is really nice because you can see we have the email content is just styled as a rich text, but then when that flows through a SendGrid, we have really nice styling and stuff on it. And same with the SMS content. And this goes back to maintainability, where we can actually give it to the client where they're just updating the emails and SMS directly in Airtable. So it feels really, seamless for them.
I was just going to ask, is the client managing everything in one place, Airtable?
Yep, largely Airtable. I know, and Corey could probably speak to it better. There are times when you kind of jump into Webflow, but I would say maybe 70, 80% in Airtable. I don't know. Corey, correct me.
Yeah. We'll show the Airtable, but everything except for the blog. So really all of the party content, notification content, all that's in Airtable. Yeah, and we could show why as well. It's like primarily an efficiency and scalability purpose. So
yeah, and I did want to show, if we have time, we can jump to it later. But probably like the interfacing with a backend with Webflow, we largely do it through forms. So when you submit a Webflow form, we actually take control of it with JavaScript, and then we send up the information to outside ourselves. We take it out of the normal Webflow control flow. So if we have time, I can do a live programming of that, but I know that might take a bit. So Corey, if you want to go over other things first.
So nerdy, that would be gnarly. Yeah, and I think one thing to add on that is that it was so awesome to be able to use native forms and stuff for the sake of styling and layout and consistency. Posted this comment of Trinoka, they said it will be easy. They said, right? It's yes, but I think what I loved about this project, as much as it was complicated and challenging, is it shows that, it can be scalable if it bleeds into low code and all that for sure. But it's the beauty of merging these two ideas. And then now we've seen things like at Conf last week with DevLink and some of that, the future is bright. We'll just say that. And then one other thing, Andrew, I wanted to note here is that you had built all of this or a lot of this as a test project before we ever started the official build. So, even for transparent context, I had a second child born in June. And so we did designs and all that early in May. And then I was out for a month and a half from the ShapeMaker team. And in that time, Andrew is working on a full on essentially built version of the functionality of this in an unstyled Webflow project. So that way you did a lot of vetting and testing and performance things before we ever got into, okay, now we're going to build the real thing and then iterate and find ways. And there's always, I feel like there was a lot of things that we didn't figure out we needed to do until we started building it, right? Little things like loading states and empty states and edge case type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think, we probably planned a large bit, but you just kind of have to trust yourself at the end. You know what I mean? It's sort of I remember telling Corey, I'm just get the data to the page and I could do what I need with it. Stuff like that, where we just kind of hey, we're confident we can get it done. Yeah, a lot of planning went.
Totally. And I think another part that was challenging but essential is also being clear with the client that building things when there is unknowns or they're just larger scale, timelines are harder. If I can even just share empathy, from working at Webflow, and I'm with y'all in terms of waiting for things like logic and memberships that have taken time. But this is such a tiny speck of a taste that I got of just how unpredictable some of that stuff is. The bigger and the more complex things you build, whatever that is, there's unknowns. And so being clear with the client was huge for us to just set guidelines and expectations around timelines and things like that. So yeah. Rad. If there aren't any other questions, I can take back over, Andrew, and I can maybe show some of the things in Webflow specifically.
Yep.
And Airtable and all the goods. Maybe we'll start even with that, the CMS and Airtable and why we went that whole route. Even on this, John asked what was the timeline like. So a lot of the early brand and strategy stuff started I think it was like March or April last year. And then a lot of the web work started in May around design and product testing, back-end stuff like I mentioned Andrew was working on. And then a lot of the front end and final product build was like August through launch in November, right? I would say that it was heavier on the tail end of that. And sorry, no, we launched in October. Anyways, so the setup in Webflow, and let's start with maybe Airtable by that. So a lot of the party content was provided by the client, or at least a start of it that we then had to refine. And it was all in like Google Docs or didn't exist. So they were writing it along the way. And we started with just the CMS and, going in. And so if I go into the parties collection here and go into an item, and we were just like populating items. Here's the hero image field, moment image, and you can see all these reference fields, right? And then if I go into a reference field, like a scene item, which, even this is one example, I can't just like click into that. If I go into a scene item of any kind, then it's also associating another reference layer of, we have the multi-reference to this item, and then that item has a reference to it, a single reference to a party, right? And that became incredibly cumbersome. Like I would go, to go add a new item with the plus here. This is one that's being worked on. I'd go add a plus, but then like if I needed to add a scene item or something else, I can't click plus again. You can't go layers in deep. So I have to like save it, and then go back. And then we were trying to also, because of the immense amount of content, we wanted to bring in other people to support populating all this. So it just like was clear this was just not going to work. It was going to take way too long and just be just kind of wasteful with time. And so, in seeing so many others like Connor Finlayson, Aaron Kronbelt, and just so many in the community using Airtable as this backend, I was like, what better opportunity to do that? So we moved to Airtable, built essentially, there's just a table that is associated with every collection in here. So you can see we have like parties, categories, and then the timeline types and notifications are what we briefly talked about in terms of just like every party is associated with a timeline type. And then every timeline type is associated with multiple notifications that dictate, if an email only or email and text, and then what all that content is that you can see here, and so on and so forth. And then, scene items are, I can even maybe provide a visual here. Going to a party, seed items are like these items here, and associating their location that's mapped to, and then, party details are the shell, essentially the shell item for all of these cards that then have references into themselves of, whether they're a drawer or a linking or so on and so forth. And so hopefully it's clear that, like with across all these tables and across all the way things are referenced so that they can be scalable. Like an example is even like, there's a lot of products. We're up to like 977 products. There's a lot of products that are used across multiple parties. So like, we did not want this to be static. Like we wanted this to be scalable. So if, acrylic scoops needs an updated subtitle, then we can update it in one place and all parties are instantly benefited and affected. And so this is where Airtable was like huge, right? So we knew that setup could all happen in there. And then you also get the added benefit of things like lookup fields. And I'll try not to get too nerdy, but I was so excited about Airtable scripts and some like image compression management we ended up building for this. Because again, just the immense amount of content that is on these pages, we had to be very cognizant about performance. And, already, I think it would be great if these pages were even faster. But it's just, as you saw, maybe a preview in the designer, it's just a lot of stuff. So anyways, once we got into Airtable and started populating things in here, then it was a matter of getting it to Webflow. So we initially tried Noble, which was fine for the first like 100 items or so. But then what started happening is like every time I needed to, make an update, you had to like manually resync, and it resynced the entire base, which would start taking a long time. And I know FinSuite's also working on this, so I'm stoked to see what they come up with. And ultimately, it just ended up not being feasible. And then I'd seen things around whale sync that was mentioned in the chat. And so again, we were in kind of a time crunch. I was like, let's just give it a try. And it was, I'm a fan. I'm a fan now for multiple reasons. Like a high level one is every time, once you have the sync set up, which is pretty straightforward, It's basically a matter of like, connecting just like with Zapier or anything else, log into Webflow, log into Airtable, and then just map all of your tables. So here's all the tables in Airtable. Here's all my collection lists in Webflow. And then mapping all the fields, like which column in Airtable maps to which field in Webflow, in the Webflow collection, right? And it automatically handles things like rich text conversion from Markdown and Airtable into HTML, which is what the Webflow CMS needs to receive for rich text, as well as just like, image handling and all that kind of stuff. And then beyond, the setup and mapping, the bigger thing as well was logs and error handling, right? So we have a couple errors even here. This was huge because like it's not perfect, and you'll always have like, especially as a lot of different people are adding content, then it just takes time to find where there's issues and things. And so this will catch and tell you, kind of what's going on, why something can't be synced, and so on. And then logs, again, like just so you can see what has actually been synced. And then every single time you make a change in Airtable, it's constantly watching the base and will sync just those individual items. So you don't, again, have this like huge wait for everything to be synced. It's like very efficient in that regard. And then lastly, I'm probably missing other things, but one other thing was like publish control to some extent, right? So you can see all of our tables here have a view on the left side. So if you're not familiar with Airtable, a view is just a version of the same table with filters or sorts or groups or whatever applied specific to only this view. And so all the syncs are pointing at this published view, which allows us to like add content to the base before it ever gets sent over to Webflow. And then another layer that we added specific to parties is also a hidden toggle. So that way, they could publish a party over to the site and then see what it will look like before it's actually live to the rest of the world. And so the way we're doing that is simply, this is just a toggle field in Webflow. And you can see if I go in here, and any collection that is showing parties just has this hidden toggle set to like, it will only show parties that aren't hidden. Right. So the page is still accessible, but they're just simply only shown, right, if they aren't hidden. And so that way they can still, like in this gallery view, you can see we have like the link to the parties at the bottom here. So they could still like set up a party, but still access the page to see what it looks like before they uncheck it being hidden. Okay. Any other questions on Airtable? I guess I could also show the scripting stuff a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of questions in the chat. Maybe just you want to just field questions or something?
Yeah. I'm looking.
Okay, so the first one, if we go all the way to the top, was we talked about how to scope it, right? How to scope this type of thing. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Dimitris wants to know, he sees like about 5 to 6 paid subscriptions. How did you sell that to the client, or the client already knew?
Subscriptions on the Partytrick site, is that what that is, I wonder? Or is it like subscriptions to different products, maybe like Airtable and JetBoost and all that?
Like all the different tools.
Yeah, so I think that was totally an expectation, set from the beginning, that like, again, the way we're building this and is kind of inherent with no code is that, duct taped approach of like multiple things integrated together, and that cost, adds up, but ultimately like the cost is nominal compared to, hiring an engineering team and building all of this from scratch, which, ultimately may be more scalable years and years down the road. But like, I really think the way we built this will last for at least several years and be fully scalable, let alone from the content, but a lot of what Andrew is showing and the way the backend's built is very, very, very scalable, and the same ultimately that it would be if it was scratch built. So yeah, that was an expectation set from the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they kind of, I feel like we delivered like a Series A or Series B like website and product for that, they didn't pay for that. But they still did, pay a good amount. So there was the expectation there that that's what they wanted.
Would you mind, would you guys be open to share like a range of how much people could charge for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you would charge for building something like this both depends not just on the tools and things you use, but like also just like who on the team you're working with. Like in general, you know, like this is well above 6 figures. And, you know, I obviously can't share like exact amounts or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I think part of even pricing and some of that, again, is just relative to our experience as a team. And like, I think it's no different to me than like marketing sites. You know, like you see quite a vast range of pricing across the Webflow space on even building marketing sites. There's like some that are building them regularly for, you know, 5,000 US, all the way up to some that are every site is, you know, 50K plus. And so I think this is really no different. It's like, it's just a little bit bigger scale, you know, it's like, yeah. Hopefully that helps.
Okay. Yeah. Diego has a question. Did you guys use the Airtable interface designer to build like a custom backend or just stick to the default views?
Right now, default views. I saw Connor Finlayson's video on using interfaces and it's so rad. But super candidly, we just like ran out of time, right? And even now we're kind of in this process of transitioning a lot of this work to the client so they can fully own it. And so right now, all content is managed from, the default views. Like, so even if somebody creates a new party, a lot of the times they'll open up the individual item like this, and then they can walk through and add elements within elements. And again, the benefit here is that I can go multiple layers deep. So I can like, add a scene item, and then in that product, now I need to make another edit to that. You can see I can go layers within layers within layers. So this view works pretty well. I would say the one risk we have is like, if you look up Connor Finlayson and his video on that is just like security and making sure people don't, like accidentally edit something or like alter views in unexpected ways or something like that. But it's pretty nominal. So, yeah.
Okay. Did you manage to use any WebP images?
Yes. So perfect transition because again, the immense amount of images and things on these pages was like a high caution point for us. And so throughout all of this, I found another video. Again, y'all, we're just figuring this out from everybody sharing how they do stuff. I found some other videos of people using Airtable scripts to do things in Airtable, like get image size and compress images. And so you can see like any table, we have this like view for QA image size. And then we're using Airtable scripts in here with Kraken, which is similar to like TinyPNG or anything like that. Kraken.io is a compression API. And so every so often, we just recommend that the client comes in here, checks this view. If there's some items missing, then they can simply first check sizes. So what this is doing is saying like, okay, on the products view, I'm going to run this, and it will go ahead and get the image size for all of the images in here. Unless this is broken. Oh no, we're good. Okay. I was gonna say I just made an update to this last night, so that would figure. And so as long as an image is, if an image is over 200 kilobytes as a rough estimate, then it'll stay in this view. If not, it's filtered out. And then once it's in this view, I can run another compression here on like products, and then run, and then this will go through and compress images and convert them to WebP in that process. It's not perfect by any means. Like sometimes it'll hit errors that are a little bit unknown. But for the most part, this is like, knocked out a lot of the things. You can see that even then there's some left, but like all of these views have that same, or all these tables have that same view where they can go through and manage that. And what this even looks like within it, without getting too nerdy, again, I would follow like Aaron Kronbelt and Connor Finlayson on YouTube as they've gotten into some of this quite a bit. Is it's essentially JavaScript that is the config stuff up here is what you see right here, where you can select a table, and then these are just like variables setting certain things depending on which table you're looking at. And then this is just running a block of code that's actually like, fetch and hitting the Kraken API, processing those images, and then returning them and updating them in the field in Airtable. So similarly, if I go out to this one, is a little bit simpler. Again, we have config at the top, so you can select the table. setting some variables dynamically, and then this is really the bulk of what it's doing. One thing I would encourage too is like, I would not say I'm just like a front end JavaScript pro. I figured it out along the way, lots of Googling, still always Googling. But like one thing that's rad about Airtable scripts is their documentation is incredible. So I knew like this was affecting what's called an attachment field, right? So like this is just, that's the field type is attachment. So like when I was trying to figure this one out, I was like, oh, I'll just search for like attachment, and then found multiple attachments. And then, they'll oftentimes even have example code in here for you. And there's also like a community around Airtable scripts. I wish there was more. I was surprised there's not like more examples out there. So maybe we should all jump in there and start figuring that out. But yeah, that was how we kind of rounded some of this out without getting too nerdy. That was kind of that. So yeah, the goal is that everything is converted to WebP and compressed as much as it can be to keep performance in check. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Is there, I don't know. I think that is it on the questions here in the chat.
Sweet. Andrew, also feel free to jump in if there's anything you want to add. I can go through, I guess, a couple other things in Webflow itself in terms of like build and structure. Again, we use Swiper for any of these like stacked sliders like you see at the top of the page. One fun thing here is like this ripped edge is using an SVG clip path. I could probably even share a code pen from that. And so, yeah, there's essentially the way it works is I have this little component symbol. They'll forever be symbols, right? I don't know. Up here. And so there's an SVG essentially path code in here that, I just exported from Figma, and then you have to convert it to like a relative unit. And so again, I can try to share more on that. And then once these are stored in here, I just have specific IDs for each one. And then those are then being referenced on top of these actual like images here. And the way they are referenced is again with CSS, which is really nice because it's pretty performant. So we're using in page settings, nth child is a CSS selector method. And so this way, it doesn't matter how many images are in the slider. This is one of those realms where we're like building it so it's pretty much infinitely scalable for the client, and they don't have to manually change things that they want all of a sudden 5 images instead of 3 or whatever. It's just however many they want. And then it's saying every first, second, or I think this is actually like every second, third, fifth, and so on. It will apply the specific ID of the clip path. And then I'm just adjusting this padding top, which is just adjusting the aspect ratio a little bit on each one, as well as a little bit of the rotation. So that's how you get this kind of like end effect of this look. Yeah.
Wow.
So great. Yeah, other things you can see like in terms of Outseta and showing things conditionally based on if you're logged in or logged out. This is pretty much consistent if you've used MemberStack or a lot of other tooling like that, where we just have a version of buttons and things that have a special attribute associated to like, this one will show if you're not logged in. This one will show if you're in a free account. This one will show if you're in the Party Pro account, right? So Outseta has documentation for all that. It was really helpful to, add dynamic things for the nav and the footer and pages throughout. If we go to the parties template page, this is again where we can show some of the stuff we spoke to earlier. So like if I go to the setup party button here, you can see right below it is a drawer element, and I can set that to block to see it. And then, so this is where we formatted in, this form. And like Andrew mentioned, these are all just native Webflow forms. And we are hiding the content for the notifications on the page so that it can be grabbed, right? And why? Oh, sorry, not that collection. Boom. now I forget where Andrew has this content in here. Right here, I think. I could be wrong. Nope, I'm wrong.
So Corey, I actually took it out of the page. So
sick. Never mind.
it originally was in the page, but now on the back end, I'm creating like I'm calling the site from the server, those utility pages, Corey, that have all the different notifications.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually calling it there. That way they get the most updated version of the notifications.
Okay, sick. That's right. Thank you. So yeah, so I think the pages, right? So you can see in here, and this is the same way that like these work as well. I mentioned fetch and JavaScript, right? So all of these items are built and styled on their template page. So the party details CMS template page is where these exist, as well as what Andrew's just referencing, which is, the timeline content. And so you can see that in here, all of this content in terms of like timing integer, units, that kind of stuff is the same and is all pulled from this table and thus collection list in here, right? So again, you can see like the timing integer, units, and so on. And so this is where Andrew's going and finding this URL relative to what's associated on the project or on the party, and then grabbing all this information and pulling it over. So you can see it's all, built and formatted in here. Pretty rad.
Yeah, I think the cool part about that is like all of the emails are really like highly styled, and that would be really hard to do. But we kind of took advantage of Webflow's like built-in elements, and we're grabbing those elements and then we're adding styles to them, as opposed to like custom creating each email there. So we saved a lot of time in terms of sending out something really nice and pretty.
Totally. Yeah, and so then similarly here, you can see, I'm not even sure, again, unedited, unfiltered, why these aren't showing. I probably have some other hidden condition in here. But same kind of thing, all the party details content that gets pulled into these individual cards is using jQuery load is a method, or JavaScript fetch is the one we're actually using for most of this to pull in. So you can see this is like a drawer for the products, tips, media, games, recipes, and so on. So all that content is in here. That way it's in one place and again, relatively scalable. Other things that are kind of unique, maybe not though, on the blog, they wanted to gate certain blog posts only for pro users. And so, on the blog at the top here, we have this div with a couple of different drawers or really just modals in here. And then we're using a conditional visibility with party pro only, which is just a toggle. So if I even come in here and find one, that is that. Game night recipes. And you can see, all right, now that means they want to show one on here. And then we have two different versions of this drawer in here based on if you're anonymous or not, which one will show. So it's just different types of content. And this is the kind of thing too that I think is just like around, again, strategy and like what is the best approach to like trying to get people to convert, or even just like leading them through that UX path to the content they're looking for or using the service itself. A similar thing you can see on the party page is the different states that are shown if you're logged in or not, or you're in a free account or you're in a pro account, right? We have these like kind of drawers these sections that show up in the middle of the page just to try to get you to convert through that. So, yeah.
Are you guys using like an overarching class strategy, like client first or anything?
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad somebody asked this because I meant to mention this, because I have maybe too many opinions around this. But I'll start with like, I'm so stoked that client first exists and so many of these and so much of the community is getting into this approach of like using systems, because I just feel they're so valuable, especially you get bigger projects like this that are, you need to be scalable and reuse classes in an efficient way, right? And so the method that we use is not client first. It's kind of just our own style system, really, that's based around Bootstrap. I mean, if y'all have been in the web space, even pre-Webflow, Bootstrap has been around for a long, long time and was always like the de facto for years and years and years. I used it in previous life before discovering Webflow. And so even things like their layout systems and all that is a lot of how we build in Webflow. So, we have a style guide page and high level kind of as expected things here, like styling and documenting type styling, colors, buttons, forms, etc. And then I'll come back to grid. But then we have utilities as well. Like you're probably familiar if you do use client first to some of those other ones, margin utilities, padding utilities, alignment, visibility, display, accessibility things, etc. And then even using some things like, like these custom little radio buttons are all styled in Webflow, but then we're using the code in an embed on some other pages. And so just like even storing these here so they can't be cleared when you're cleaning up CSS. And then components is really just as it sounds, some pre-built components that we're using across the site. And then the last part is our layout system. So I think this is like my biggest opinion around just, I think, style frameworks. It's important to have a reusable way to create layouts because, as unique as a design is or not, you'll always end up having simple column structures and layouts. And so I'm very passionate about like how you implement that, right? And so our method, again, if you want to really get in the nerdy of it, like check out Bootstrap. But essentially, it's just like a 12-column system that you can see if I scroll down the page here. This is where all the classes are kind of pre-built, but it's just showing that like, on desktop, you can have 1 through 12, tablet, mobile landscape, and mobile portrait. And you essentially are just like layering these classes together to create layouts. I could share a Loom as well on kind of that in more detail, but the essential part of it is like you add a div, you give it a class of row, and then you add a div within that to define a column, right? And so if I add, we're going to do one more in here just so we can see what's going on. BG, I don't know, basil, sure. And if I add a couple columns here, they'll automatically adjust to however many you need to fit, but then you add combo classes based on how many out of 12 columns you want to scale a column to at each breakpoint. So LG stands for desktop. And then from there, maybe I'll do call MD12 so that when we get down to mobile or tablet, it's full width. And then what's cool is I could go back up is like, maybe I want to go call SM6 back here, right? Like I can totally do that. So we've found it to be pretty tried and true across like many, many, many sites we've built. And yeah, there's also even if you Google Webflow Flexbox columns is literally just, it's copied from this. This is a clonable somebody built a long time ago. I'll drop this in the chat. Shout out to Kevin. That's essentially the system. Yeah. Does that make sense? Any questions?
Yes. Okay, cool. Anybody have more questions? Unmute yourselves if you want.
I have one question, Corey. Why did you choose Auth instead of MemberStack and MemberSpace?
I would say the primary reason initially was the email functionality, and we, instead of using Twilio and SendGrid, as Andrew was pointing out, like we were initially thinking we could do drip campaigns and all that notification functionality directly in Auth. So that was an initial first look, but then like after we realized we that wouldn't be the best approach, there was still a lot of other benefits. Like I mentioned, like support tickets. There's a whole like help desk section here that allows you to just add an embed at the bottom or anywhere on your site. So people can like submit tickets if they have issues, right? Like the site is still new, so there's not a lot of traffic just yet, but that kind of functionality was great. And then I would say, and Andrew, maybe you could speak even more to this, that like comparing it to things like MemberStack, like the developer documentation for Party or for Auth was really, really good and something flexible Andrew felt comfortable working with compared to some of the other tools. And like, I think the thing to remember too is like Outseta, it sounds like they got a lot of traction from the Webflow community, but like it was not a tool built just for Webflow like MemberStack was originally. So like it's actually built for any kind of SaaS to be this foundation tooling. And so it has a lot of scalability and things beyond just the Webflow no code space. And so I think we're also attracted to that. But yeah, Andrew, if you have anything to add, feel free.
Yeah, I think honestly the biggest thing is it's just really, really well built. Like I talked about, it does caching really well. A lot of the way it automatically gives you sort of like a miniature database of accounts and people under those accounts. So it really organizes the data well. And like I think Jeff's like average response time was like 2 hours on an email or something like that. It was incredible, where I was just like, okay, I feel more comfortable using this new technology with someone who's given me such great support. So that was a huge part there. Yeah, I can't sing Outseta's praises enough. Like I literally said, like, I've taken sort of the way it was built and I'm like learning from it, and I'm going to apply it to like other projects that I've, worked on. So yeah, thanks Jeff and the whole Outseta team.
Awesome. Thanks guys.
Awesome.
Wow. We're all mind blown, guys.
Thanks y'all for
What
listening
a
to
project.
super nerdy. But I think, yeah,
Wow.
I think, hopefully we just want to share as just like, we felt like it was a good example of, again, we are not the only ones doing this. There's a lot of people that have built other products in the space. And this was just our recent approach at it. And we were stoked with how ultimately things turned out, and just like feeling confident in the scalability and flexibility of it. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's been even rad after we launched. There's been a lot. We have a good little bug queue, or even like future feature request queue. And, it's been awesome to be able to keep implementing things and not feel too much restriction. Like certainly there's some areas that is like, all right, that's a pretty aggressive request. But a lot of the things are like little things, that especially front end stuff in Webflow, as we all know, is pretty quick to implement. Or troubleshoot even. And so, yeah, it's been a fun experience.
Yeah, I think I was surprised at how scalable it is, like on kind of all of the levels. Like Outseta has been great from a scalability. Like I think we can process, around like 100,000 emails and text messages a second or something like that. And then if we wanted to, we could bump it up even more. Just like Corey said, I think this should last them like a long time before they need to, hire out their whole dev team. So I think we've pushed Webflow to the limits, and it went pretty far.
Wow. How awesome. Yeah! Woo! Well, thank you so much for coming. And that's it. Thank you so much, guys.
Appreciate it, y'all. Thanks for chiming in. We'll see you in the community.